So to all the listeners, welcome to another episode on this podcast about the mental factor in HSE. I'm truly excited to have Jeremy with me today. He's going to talk us through his career in HSE and kind of from all the way from where he got started to where he's at right now. He's doing some truly fascinating work, and he's hopefully going to share a bit of light on that. And I know for a fact that it's also a very interesting story of how he actually got into the world of HSE. So a very warm welcome to you. Jeremy, how are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Bjørn.
You're more than welcome. So whereabouts are you in the world right now as we speak?
I'm in Seattle, Washington. That's where I live. I've been here for a few years. I'm originally from a small town, but this is where I'm at today.
That's great. All right. So please share, how did you end up in safety? What was it the thing that actually got you engaged into this world of HSE?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my career as a safety safety professional, let's say, got started like a lot of people back in the old days, I like to say. So I've been in safety for 23 plus years now. And when I started off, I worked in a chemical plant. I was 19 years old, 18 or 19. I was running this pretty dangerous chemical plant, honestly. And we didn't have any safety programs. This is a small plant. I mean, we didn't have a safety person. We didn't even have like any safety programs. We didn't have safety training, nothing. And then here in Washington State, we have, it's called DOSH, which is equivalent to the federal OSHA. So they showed up one day, did a tour of our plant, and we came away with a whole list of safety violations that they were going to fine us for, or maybe they did fine us, I'm not sure. But at the time, my supervisor at the time said, "Hey, do you want to help, fix one of these things?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I'll do that." And at the time it was, if you know what an MSDS is, they're called SDSs now, but Material Safety Data Sheet. My first job as a safety person was to collect MSDSs for all the chemicals that we had. I didn't even know what an MSDS was. I mean, that's how bad our safety program was. So that was my first job. And then I did that. And then he's like, "Oh, we have another thing. Do you want to do that?" I don't remember what it was, but then it just snowballed from there. I started helping with all these different things. And then as I was doing that, I started learning regulations and, oh, wait, we need to comply with that and comply with that. And then, then I learned about different safety programs you need and safety training. And in the next probably year of that was really when it started snowballing. Well, I'll do this. I was still doing my regular job, but then, that was becoming the safety coordinator also. And over time, maybe a year, the safety coordinator job actually became my full-time job. And then I just, I dove in. I learned everything that I could. I took a million different trainings, webinars, seminars, workshops. I mean, I tried to learn as much as I could. I wound up reading regulations, and that's not for everybody, I know. But I like to kind of joke, and some of my coworkers, we like to say we're safety nerds, because it's just one of those things I kind of enjoy learning, figuring things out, and then how does that apply to us? And then ultimately, how can I use that to help our company and help our employees be safe? So going back to my original job there, I think is a small company. Our first year or two that I was there, we had 12 OSHA recordable incidents. And we had 50 people, or actually less than that, probably 35 or 40 people. And if you don't know what that is, that's a lot of very serious injuries for a small group like that. It's really bad. And so just in that first year, just implementing programs and training and stuff, we reduced it from 12 to I think 1 or 2 the next year. But then at a certain point, after years of doing this, I was new to the whole safety world, and I didn't, I was just putting procedures in place. We didn't have anything. So I was kind of doing the regulatory stuff. Okay, we need to do this by the book and do this and this and this. And over the years, I just learned more and more and implemented all these programs. And then, so I think I worked at that company I wound up being there for like 15 years, being a safety person. And my responsibilities grew quite a bit. At one point, I was just the safety coordinator for our local chemical plant. And then after a while, I was promoted to environmental health and safety manager. And my responsibilities grew from our local chemical plant to our headquarters, which is near Seattle, or was when I was in the company, is near Seattle. Went to the headquarters there. And then they opened a facility in Shanghai, China, and a facility in Bangalore, India. And so I wound up becoming the EHS manager for all 4 sites. So I got to travel to China and India and learn what they're doing over there. And it was very interesting, very cool. And then I got to travel around the country and things like that. And it was great. So going back to that company and like the incident rates and things like that, after I think 3 or 4 years, we got down to basically 0 accidents and pretty much stayed at that the rest of the time I was there. Had a really good safety program. That's on top of all the other stuff. I mean, that's just very basic. There's a lot of compliance issues and a lot of other things like that we worked on. But as far as safety goes, that was kind of the story there. And then I don't know, you maybe want to stop now, but I'm not, if you want me to go to the next.
No, but it's perfectly fine. I have a question that I think is quite interesting, because you mentioned, how old were you when you actually started, when you were working at this plant and you started to go into kind of the safety direction? What age were you?
I was 18 or 19. So I didn't go to college like a lot of people do and should. My life experience was just different, just the way it is. And like I said, there's quite a few people from the old days that got started in safety kind of the same way. But nowadays, I mean, everybody goes to school and gets a degree in safety and things like that. My schooling was on the job training.
But how did you, because in that age, right, you mentioned that it wasn't too safe an environment, and then you actually had to go in and start to tell people, hey, you're acting unsafe. How was that actually received by the rest of the organization?
That's a great question, because that's actually a big part of the story as well. So as a safety person, safety professional, any safety professional you talk to, they're going to tell you, if they're good anyway, that they have thick skin. And because you have to tell people uncomfortable truths. You have to tell people what to do sometimes. And there's an art to that. You don't just go around telling people what to do. And so how was that received? That's a really good question, because this is also part of my story that I like to tell people sometimes, is because I was one of the guys in the chemical plant, me and a few other guys running the place, and I was no safer than anybody else, young guy, I did not think ahead, or I didn't even think about the moment, I should say, at all. And it was tough. I can still remember the very first training I did. It feels like yesterday. Here I am it wasn't even a PowerPoint. We didn't even have like that stuff back in the day. This was overhead projector with those things, with the clear sheets that you write on, and then you put that. It was that. Yeah. And this was like, I didn't know what I was doing. It was a safety training. Literally what I did was I copied our accident prevention program, like word for word. I didn't have pictures, and I just put it up on the thing, and I was like reading off the thing. It was terrible. And the worst part for me, in hindsight, it was very good, but was, here I am, kind of a young guy, telling all these people that are all older than me, that had been working there for a while, telling them how to be safe and do their job safely. It did not go well. It was very uncomfortable, and you could tell they were just like, what are we doing this? It didn't go over well. But I had to learn how to talk to people the right way and develop my training skills over time. It didn't get better right away. It took me years to get better at it and get better at listening was really important. What are people's concerns? And then talking to people in a way that's not, talking down to people, not necessarily telling them what to do, but I think it's really important to tell people why they need to, follow this rule or that rule, and always have an answer. That's a really important one for me, is always have an answer. And if you don't have the answer, don't make something up, right? Be like, I don't know that, but I will get back to you, and keeping your word. If you don't know, if somebody asks a question or whatever, and you're not sure, tell them you don't know, and then get back to them, get the answer and get back to them. But yeah, you have to learn to think quick on your feet. There's always, even over the years, as things got better and people did start paying attention a little bit more, you always have like one or two guys. There's one guy in particular I can think of is always in there, always cracking jokes and saying little rude things or funny things to try to throw me off. And, and so those kind of people you have to learn how to deal with too. And, so it was challenging, but and so I'm just thinking about in the training room, but where I think I got a lot of traction with people was not necessarily in the training room. Over time that helped, but getting out of my office and going and working with people and understanding what they're doing and helping create like procedure. Lockout tagout is a good example. You could be a safety manager and go out there and just write all these procedures up and say, hey, go do this, which happens. But it's much more effective when you get with the maintenance person who actually does that work and go through it with them step by step, so you understand what they're doing. And then you can kind of explain, you can get into the steps of it and work with them on each kind of step of the way to better understand what the actual risk is and how they can do their job and still be safe while they're doing their job. This is another thing that is kind of a joke in the safety world, I think, but it makes a lot of sense. Is sometimes we joke like, well, the safest thing we can do for this company is to just turn off the lights and have everybody go home. Nobody's going to get hurt, right? Obviously, that's not practical. That's companies need to make money. That's what they're there to do. So you have to work with people. You have to work with companies, everybody from the top down, to understand what the business needs are and how you can implement, or I don't know the right way to say this, but to tailor, I guess, the safety messages and programs to fit the business needs.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get back to that just shortly. I'm just curious to know. So you obviously remember your first training very, very clearly. So do you also remember your first training when you were actually satisfied with what you presented?
So I don't remember that, but I'll tell you a story. I've never felt like, okay, I'm completely satisfied with this training. I do like, there's things I like to do in creating trainings. I actually really like doing that and creating nice ones. I always try to think about what can stick in people's mind, but that developed over time because I had a lot of bad ones that people just, you can tell, weren't paying attention. But I can, the one of the interesting things I think about being a safety professional is you don't necessarily always see the good that you did, right? So my best friend is he was a carpenter for years, built beautiful houses, right? And I always said that I almost wish that I would have done something like that, because when you're done building a house, you can look like he'd send me pictures, look at this house, and be like, oh, it's so cool. I can't do that. That's not, safety person a lot of times don't get recognized until something goes bad. Why didn't we have that training, that safety, So there's not a lot of, what's the word I'm trying to come up with? You'll have to cut this out, but not a lot of positive feedback a lot of the time.
The sentence that you said was so strong, right? You don't always see what you
do. And I can tell you there have been there's two times I can think of in my life where it hit me where, oh, I think people are paying attention. And it was years afterwards. So I know that people are paying attention. And, later on when I got better at training and stuff, of course I would get compliments and things like that, especially on like regulatory stuff, because that's a lot easier to get across. But I remember there was a guy, he was a maintenance guy at my first company that I worked with. I worked with this guy for, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. And then he went his, how things do. He went his way and I went my way. And I didn't talk to this guy for, probably 10 years or something. Long time, right? And then one day I got this, I think it was an email or maybe a message on LinkedIn. And he messaged me. He's like, hey, I'm in this new role. And this happened to be something about, I think, hazardous waste or something. I can't remember exactly what the issue was. But he said, you remember when you told me about this one thing? And he's like, that always stuck with me. I always thought, that was a really good idea. And I thought, wait, and again, I don't remember exactly what it is, had something, but I remembered like 10 years later, I was like, oh, this guy was actually paying attention and learned something from me. And it stuck with him for 10 years. I was like, wow. So some of the things I'm saying actually help. And then another thing that happened, which was really cool, was another person at the same company. And this person, she was like a PhD chemist, very, very smart chemist, right? Anyway, and this was somebody who I talked to sometimes. We worked together here and there on different projects and stuff, but it wasn't like we ever had like deep talks about safety or anything like that. And again, I left the company, whatever. And years later, I get a message from her, and she started a safety training company of all things. I didn't know she had a passion about safety, but I think she had a friend that was in safety, blah, blah. Anyway, so she invited me she wanted to know if I would be interested in coming and being a part of the company and being a trainer. And I was like, well, or at least help kind of understand maybe some of the things that I need to do and kind of be a part of it or whatever. So I felt honored. I couldn't believe like this person I never, you leave a company and you rarely talk to people ever again. But this person like reached out specifically to me because somehow what I did had an impact on her and the way she thought about working. So, and safety and things like that.
So one thing that is very interesting to me is that what you're kind of describing between the lines is that you kind of have this movement throughout. But the beginning, it was kind of just sticking to the rules, explaining people what to do and how to do it, and then editing kind of the procedures and then trying to teach it to them again.
Yep.
At some point in that journey,
yep,
didn't you think about leaving and just saying, they're not paying attention anyway, they're not following the procedures, now I'm just going to do something else?
Honestly, no, not really. I like what I do. It's interesting to me. I'm always learning something new. I mean, at that company, after a while, it got boring. But I was traveling to China and traveling to India and learning, working with people around the world. So I loved it. And even though maybe early on I thought more like, oh, these people aren't listening to me, but I didn't take it as like I'm going to quit. It was more like, oh, this is a challenge. I need to figure this out. I need to figure out how to do my job better. And so, yeah, I've never really considered changing careers or anything like that. I like it.
Beautiful. So when did you start to realize, okay, I need to talk to people. It's actually what their reflections are that's going to have an impact on the work that you do. When did that kind of start to emerge with you?
Well, I think early on, in the first probably few years, when I would try to say roll out a new safety program, say, hey, here it is. This is the regulations. Here it is. Follow this, everybody. And, it was clear that it was just another thing that people have to do that is going to slow down their work. And what's the point of this? It's just like, we're just doing this just because we have to. It's not, nobody really would care, I guess, if that's the right way to say it. Mm-hmm. But when I would directly get in there, like the lockout tagout is a good example where I would go in and actually work with somebody and, we would look at maybe some regulations together or really, really pick somebody's brain on like, okay, how exactly is this done? And then instead of just coming in and saying, here's how it's done, you work with somebody and they tell you, well, here's how we do it. And then you kind of work to collaborate, right? Like, okay, if you're doing it this way, could you do it maybe this way different? Or, and when you can meet people where they're at like that, it goes a long way. And at a certain point, when you realize that, well, you don't go back to just telling people what to do. You work with people, and so that's like I would say there's almost like two in the safety world, like two big groups of people you talk to. One is the workers, right? And you try to get in with them and you train, but then there's also the management side of things. And that's like a different way of talking to people, right? With management, that honestly was harder because I came from production world. I always felt like I was just one of the guys.
Yeah.
So it was easy to, I've always kind of felt that way, that it's just always easier for me to make friends and with the workers, but the management, they're there to manage business and keep the business going and, make the profits grow, and so getting in a management team, getting your place at the table is important.
Yeah.
Because there's times, I don't want to say this, but there's companies you can work at where the safety person is just like there because they have to be there and they're not really part of the team necessarily. Mm-hmm. Making key decisions.
Yeah.
And doing that can really set a company up for failure when it comes to safety. So
definitely.
Yeah.
But equally to the question, when did you in your career realize that you needed to have kind of the human elements of not just going in and writing procedures and stuff like that, but at some point you must have also realized what you mentioned just before, that what's kind of the business needs. So when did you start to realize I need to be able to actually speak their language to be able to create success with the workers?
Mm-hmm. Probably at that first company, I felt left out a lot of the times of things. And so the company would go in this direction and I'm saying, wait, we have to do this, and it could come back to bite you in some instances. And so I remember I had a director at the time who was really good about, safety. He was passionate about safety. And I think he might've been the one that told me, like, you need to, make a place at the table. Don't wait to be invited. If you want to make an impact, you need to step up and plead your case, like tell people why this is important. And that's where also part of my skills as far as interpreting regulations and things like that, where, you don't come in and say, well, according to 29 CFR, blah, 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 blah. No. But what you do is you say, you come in and say, well, there's this new regulation coming out, or there's blah, blah, blah. And this could affect us this way. They could, come in and, if we're not doing the right thing, they could come in and shut us down and stop our production. Or when it comes to, more like along the actual safety part, health part is, if we don't follow this, maybe this person could get injured or hurt, or, seriously injured or whatever. And when you start learning about costs of injuries and the indirect costs, again, businesses are there to make a profit. And when the profit gets cut into, that's an issue. That's a problem, right? And so once you start learning about those indirect costs, your insurance premiums going up, damage to a company's brand, things like that, the hidden costs that you don't see necessarily, that often will get management's attention. Oh, wait, if this happens, this could happen. Now, it honestly depends on the management also. I've worked with management that they say safety first, but It's more of like a slogan they just say, but then I've worked with companies where that truly is 100%. I worked at a company where after that one, where it was, they had a very effective stop work program. It was like one of the first things you're taught. If you feel unsafe for any reason, whatever it is, you can stop the work, talk to your manager, and we'll get it figured out. Right. And they would, I experienced that where they literally shut down operations where it definitely could hurt the company, but they did it because you had management that was actually 100% dedicated. Mm-hmm. And they didn't cut corners, and that just is what it is. Safety really was first. So talking to management, it really depends on the management on how I don't know how deep the conversation goes, I guess, or how much you need to twist their arm or whatever. Where I'm at now, this job, when I was kind of looking for different jobs, and I, had a few different interviews and things like that. And I remember at some point, at this point in my career, been through different kinds of management types that care and don't care. Fortunately for me, I feel like I'm at the point in my career where I can pick and choose which company I'm going to work for. And, if it's one of those slogan based companies where it's like, yeah, safety first, I just have no desire to work at a place like that. That you can't get things done. It's almost impossible. But when you have a company that does care and it's very clear they care and they do put safety first, well, that's the company you can work with. And
And in general, if you were to look upon kind of the broad 20 years of career that you have had, where do you see do you see tendencies that were there in the beginning that there are not that much there anymore? So kind of the shift that's going on, what's happening, or what did happen from you started until today?
Well, a lot has happened, but I would say in general, and this I think goes along with the mental focus stuff, right? I started a new job. It was about 4 or 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And I was a HSE manager for their North American operations. And the company and the types of facilities that I was going to be the HSE manager for, let's go back a little bit. I was working, before this, I was working in dangerous chemical plants. I was working in, I worked in agriculture, fertilizer plants, some pretty dangerous stuff, potentially. Well, when I came to this company, it was nothing like that. Honestly, it was mostly offices. And I thought, okay, well, this is going to be easy as far as I'd done 1 million accident investigations back in the day at these other companies. And I thought, oh, well, I'm not going to really be doing very many accident investigations here. It's just office workers, right? For the most part. I had probably, I don't know, let's say 100 facilities across US and Canada. I probably did more accident investigations there than my other jobs. And, after maybe a year of doing accident investigations here, there was like kind of a theme running through. So when you do a root cause analysis, when you get done with that, right, you get to your root causes, and then you have to come up with corrective actions, right? So let's say your corrective action or your root cause is, well, you don't have this lockout tagout program, or you don't have this forklift training or whatever it is. Easy. Your corrective action is get this program and implement it and train people on it. Okay. Well, I was starting to see a lot of trends, especially in these offices, where the root cause was lack of attention, complacency, not paying attention, right? So to me, that's a real, okay, well, what's the corrective action? Pay attention. Okay, go pay attention now. You're telling an adult, you're not paying attention, well, go pay attention. I mean, what does that even mean? How do you do that? How do you teach an adult? Or how do you tell an adult? It's easy to say, go pay attention when you're doing things. And so then, that became a real challenge to me. Like, well, how do you do that? Like, what, it's not effective. To me, corrective actions need to be effective, right? Well, if you just tell somebody to go pay attention, that's not effective. So what do you do? Well, around that time, a very interesting article came my way from a safety journal. I don't remember the title of it, but it was something about mindfulness and safety. And so I knew about mindfulness and meditation and things like that. I'd practiced a little bit myself, but I'd never thought about it as a safety technique or, anything safety related. So I was just like peace of mind kind of a thing. But I read this article, and the article was talking about how a company, I can't remember what it was, but a company implemented a mindfulness program more about productivity. They wanted people to stay focused and get to work. But one of the side benefits of this was they realized their accident rates went way down. And then like a light bulb kind of went off, like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. If you teach people how to pay attention, you might be onto something, right? So at that time, at that company, we actually went ahead, and this was one of the companies, like I said, that really did put safety first, and they took this to heart because we would do the investigations and we'd say do this or that or whatever, and people would just kept getting hurt, like it was like crazy. So then they decided we are going to do something about this. So they implemented a whole mindfulness program. It was a big deal. They got a lot of different people, not just safety people involved, and from that program, we got a lot of positive feedback. People were talking about how, they're thinking about things more often, and there's practical. It's not just like pay attention. There's like literal techniques that you can do to teach your brain how to stay focused and pay attention to the task at hand, not thinking about what you're going to do after work or what happened yesterday. You're thinking about what's happening right now. And it's very effective. I personally think it's the number one. It's not like it's not like what you'd call a safety program necessarily. It's not like a confined space program. But I personally think it's like a key component. I think that if you could teach people how to stay mentally focused, you're going to reduce your accidents by almost all of them. Even if you don't have like necessarily the technical safety training in place and things like that, you're going to stop and think about what you're doing. Oh, maybe I should put on the seatbelt, or maybe I should slow down, or maybe I should, you're thinking these things through. It's very effective. And also like a huge side benefit of this, I think, is, I think in the old days, maybe even still today, a lot of people tend to kind of turn on their safety hat while they're at work. Like, oh, I'm at work, now I'm going to be safe, right? Pay attention a little bit more. And then when you're not at work, it's kind of like, oh, I'm just doing my thing. Might not think about it. And I recently just did a kind of introductory meeting with a bunch of new colleagues, and you're supposed to tell like a funny story. And my funny story was, funny, but it just is what it is. It's a good example of not paying attention. Me, a safety person of 20 years, I drilled a hole in my hand at home. It was really painful. It's because I wasn't thinking. I happened to be like drilling a hole through a cabinet door, and I couldn't brace it. So I was like, oh, I'll just use my hand to like hold it. And what I didn't think through was like when the drill bit goes through, it went into my hand. I felt, as a safety person, I should have been being mindful, but that was like a lesson to me for others also. Right. Like, oh yeah, just cause it's my job. It doesn't mean I'm, safety guy all the time. Like, everybody needs reminders. Everybody needs to think things through and things like that. And, so yeah, it's when you truly can implement and be mindful what you're doing, it's not going to just stick to work. It's literally can affect your whole life, at home when
Definitely.
you're driving, when you're driving, when you're, all these things like focusing what's going on the road instead of your phone. That's probably one of the most common ones that everybody knows. You don't text and drive. That's just a thing. Right. But really what that's about is mental focus. You want to be mentally focused on the road, not anything else.
Definitely. And in your opinion, is this where the future of HSE is going?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think that I've seen a lot of trending of going towards being more focused, and it's one of those things too where, you know, even my current role where I don't necessarily work as a safety manager, but I work with clients. When I mention this stuff to them, it like a light bulb goes, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, it's one of those things where if you don't maybe know about it or even think about it, you know, okay. But then when you just think about it for a second, like, oh yeah, well, this makes complete sense. And yeah, you're starting to see a lot more of companies doing these types of things, trying to train people to think things through, paying attention, focusing.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really interesting to kind of learn how you kind of got thrown into safety and then just ended up loving it. And I think that there were some really good reflections on, I must say, I really like the thing where you kind of come to the conclusion, oh, they're not paying attention. I might need to show my interest in what they're actually doing and then go work with them. I think that that's really, really great.
Sure.
So it has been a true pleasure having you on the podcast. Is there anything that you think that I like asking you? Is there anything that you would like to actually tell from your career?
I would just say, kind of going back to the thing where, you know, a safety professional doesn't necessarily get the positive feedback. You know, you don't get to see that picture of the house that you just built, right? You kind of learn to appreciate not getting feedback, I guess. I think what I'm trying to say is, even though you don't necessarily can't see it, you know it. You know it. You're affecting people. You know, especially when you get those little confirmations from people, like, "Hey, this thing you taught me," or you know, and then. Like in my last job, when we were doing the mindfulness, like literally just talking to people and like trying to understand what they do and then helping them, you feel that appreciativeness then, right? When the light bulb goes off in that person's head right there, and then you say, oh, maybe you could do that a little different. Oh yeah. You know, I'm thinking of ergonomics is a good one. There's a big ergonomics push for this last company I was at, and instead of just saying, here, do your work like this, we literally worked with each individual, talked to them, show me what you do, show me how you do that, and then talk to them like, oh, well, maybe is your back, maybe your lower back, so you kind of look at it and go, is your lower back maybe sore at the end of the day? Oh yeah, it is. Well, maybe if you do it like, you know, a little bit different like this. And when people don't have a sore back the next day, they're very appreciative. Like, oh wow, yeah, that really worked. Thank you. You know, so it's not necessarily, you know, of course, seeing incident rates come down, that's awesome. But it's really that personal, to me anyway, that personal connection, that personal, you know that you had some small impact on their life, and maybe you saved them from getting seriously hurt, or even a little injury. You know, maybe you helped them from getting a small injury or whatever it is. So I think that's one of the main reasons why I keep doing what I'm doing, and I like the job, and that type of feedback is really awesome.
All right. Once again, thank you so much for sharing, and actually thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with me. I know that what you just said here at the end is going to be very helpful for especially people who are coming into HSE and understanding that the appreciation from the organization can happen over time.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Bjørn. It's awesome.